Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Erin Hogan, and I'm going to be your moderator for today's call. Before we begin, we do just have a few housekeeping items for you. The tool that you're using here is completely interactive, so you can feel free to ask questions right within that chat panel on your screen. And then we're going to save your questions for the end of the presentation for a little Q&A. We're also recording this event today and have a few documents to share with you. And so please note that that recording file and the slide deck and all of the documents will be sent out to all those who attended within the next day or so. All right, so we can dive in here. Today, you'll be hearing from WordWrite founder and chief storyteller, Paul Fariga, and our digital director, Kira Koskum. During the next several minutes, Paul and Kira will offer their techniques for sharing your company's story in a digital setting. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and pass things off to Paul, and he's going to kick us off. All right, Paul.
Thank you, Erin. Really appreciate that. Thank all of you for being here today. Consider these 4 words, if you will, for a minute. Maybe you want to close your eyes. Don't worry, you're on a webinar. Nobody can see you. Once upon a time. What do those words bring to mind? What pictures? What voice do you hear in your head? What experience does it take you back to? Once upon a time. All right, if you close your eyes, open them. If you didn't, just think about what that brought to mind. Maybe you want to write down somewhere a favorite bedtime story. Because really, once upon a time in our culture is a phrase that is most often associated with bedtime stories. In fact, I blogged for the Forbes Agency Council, and in a recent blog, I linked to the 25 most popular bedtime stories. Many of my favorites, Goodnight Moon among them. That tells us something. Once upon a time, it tells us that story has meaning for us as human beings. And that's going to be a big part of what we're talking about today. Sorry, Erin, I accidentally hit the button there. You go ahead. All right. Why stories? So today, as this graphic shows, we receive 5 times as much information on a daily basis as we did in 1986. And I'm sure there's people with us today who maybe weren't alive in 1986. But for those of you who were, like me, you probably realize that's a very true statement. The context here is a huge challenge for us as business leaders and as communicators. This image behind the statistic is an artwork created by an artist by the name of Nadia Collazo Lawrence. A few years ago, she was the distinguished artist in residence at Grand Valley State University in Michigan. It's 9 feet high. It's 45 feet long. It's called Comfortably Numb. It's her depiction of today's information overload. And it's made from magazines, newspapers, video images. And it really gives you a sense of the clutter that we face every day when we're trying to communicate. That stat that I referenced earlier comes from a University of Southern California study. It was actually done in 2011. So if anything, things have only gotten worse. They probably need to do that study again. Now, there's a reason why stories really work for us. Erin, you can go to the next slide. And that is because of something called the old brain. Reaching the old brain is the way that we break through clutter. This is the part of the brain that's driven by storytelling. Researchers call it the old brain because it's the part of the brain that's shared with most mammals on the face of the earth, controls things like breathing, fight or flight. Now, why does the brain like stories? Because the brain is the world's oldest energy-saving appliance. It consumes just 3% of your body weight, but sucks up 23% of your body's energy. So the old brain uses the stimuli that you see here on this screen to tell your body, your brain, when to turn on, when to turn off, when to speed up, or when to slow down. So the old brain is what tells college kids to fall asleep in the middle of a boring lecture. It tells audiences to rise and applaud with relief at the end of an overly long political speech. Now, of the 6 stimuli here, great stories tap particularly into the tangible, memorable, and emotional drivers. But honestly, and we're going to talk about this with regard to digital marketing and social media, visual, personal, contrastable, all 6 of these stimuli for the old brain respond extremely well to digital storytelling. But don't take my word for it. You know, even people who aren't seen as great storytellers, although they're seen as great business people, agree that storytelling is essential to success in business. Jeff Bezos, of course, and then Steve Jobs, well known as being a great business storyteller, he too believes that storytellers and stories are critical to, as he puts it, setting the vision, values, and agenda of an entire generation. Now, for those of you who are with us today, why do you care about stories? Well, number one, because you want to deliver results. And Kira and I are going to show you how stories shared through digital marketing deliver results. Stories are memorable. The best stories are timeless, and they even transcend culture. And as a result, great stories create great communication. For marketers, you know, storytelling and creativity, it's a table stake. What we're looking for here is creativity that moves hearts and minds. Now, you might be with me so far, but you're saying to yourself, okay, Paul, but why digital? I really don't understand how this works with digital. You may feel that storytelling are as different maybe as a rotary dial phone and the latest iPhone or Samsung smartphone, right? If you do feel that way, it's our goal, Kira and myself, to challenge your assumptions and give you something to think about today. If you're already on board with the idea of digital storytelling, we want to inspire you to do more with what we have to share in the next few minutes. First, let's define what we're talking about here, right? What the heck is digital storytelling? So it is quite literally the process of taking all the digital platforms we're familiar with and marketing elements that probably many of you who are with us today already use on a daily basis and putting them together in a story format to share a compelling narrative. Keep that in mind as we cover the next few slides and the information we have to share. Now, why is digital storytelling important? Well, because the evolution of marketing has just gone crazy. As you can see here, the marketing universe has gone from print to radio to TV, online. I mean, it's just crazy. The sources, the inputs for information today, everything from texts to social media to the web, billboards, I mean, you name it. We are just constantly bombarded by information. And as this has happened, the ability of business leaders to rise above this digital clutter and to share the information that they want to with their most important audiences has become more and more difficult. Sharing your story, in fact, sharing a very special kind of story that we're going to define for you next, cuts through this clutter and connects with the audiences at the level of their old brains and allows you to engage with them on an elemental human level. So if you think about what all of us see in digital marketing and social media today, it's clear that simply having a great tagline is not enough. You think about your own consumption of digital marketing, those narratives that draw you in can actually create empathy. And we're going to share some examples of that today. And they can be engaging. It's really not a hard sell. Sometimes it's entertainment, sometimes it's education, sometimes it's just information. Regardless, you become part of the story. And as a result, a great digital story builds trust with the audiences that you most want to reach. As I mentioned just a few minutes ago, There's a very special kind of story that we're concerned with at WordWrite. In fact, I've written a book about it called Finding Your Capital S Story. The capital S story is the story above all others for your organization because it answers these critical questions. Why should somebody buy from you, work for you, invest in you, partner with you, be your neighbor? If you work at a nonprofit, volunteer, or donate, these are critical elements of your core story. Many stories that your organization may share on a daily basis come and go, but this story is the one that's eternal. This is the one that really carries the weight for you. These kinds of stories are the stories that require no explanation. If I say to you in conversation, it's a David and Goliath story, you don't have to be a biblical scholar to know that David versus Goliath is the underdog story. So great stories like that require little or no explanation, and they can be adapted, adopted, repurposed to become the story of your own organization, if in fact that is the story that represents your organization. These kind of stories work in the cluttered environment that we're facing today because they connect with audiences at a deep biological and emotional level. I've given you some examples here of what a capital S story might look like. Now, in the case of your organization, you may be at different points in your journey. So it may be that your story is about the origin or the founder. It may be about a dream or a passion or a vision. It may be about something that's been invented, the greatest thing since sliced bread. It might be about the maturation of a technology or a product, or it might be about something that changed everything. So think of your own organization. What is your capital S story? Now, regardless of which of these 5 examples I've shared here that might represent your organization, or in fact, maybe another story, excuse me, another story entirely. All right. Maybe the story of somebody choking. No, another story entirely might represent your organization. It doesn't matter. Technology company, it might be the innovation, or a nonprofit, it might be who you serve. I think you get the idea. This story is the fuel for whatever digital storytelling your organization decides to do. Now, why does that story work so well in digital marketing? Because the capital S story and digital marketing are literally made for each other. Remember a few slides ago, we talked about what kind of information stimuli the old brain likes. Self-contained. Well, social media can be self-contained. What stands out for the old brain? What stands out in social media? Contrast, emotional. Some of the best viral content in digital marketing is viral because it's emotional. And of course, it's visual. Everybody knows the #1 search engine in the world is Google. The #2 search engine, also owned by Google, is YouTube. There's a reason for that. And let's not forget that great digital marketing can be a personal experience. It's you and your phone, you and your laptop, you and your tablet. One-on-one communication. I'm going to let Aaron jump in here because this is an interactive session. We promised you that today. We have a couple of polls and a few things that we're going to share. So take it over, Aaron.
All right, so a poll should be popped up on your screen. And if you want to go ahead and answer, we're going to see what digital medium works best for your company story. Give people a couple seconds here to reply, and then Paul will review the results.
This is good, folks. Keep the answers coming.
want to review what we've got here?
Sure, absolutely. It's very interesting, the answers that we got here, because a lot of folks don't consider email to be a form of digital marketing, but it most definitely is. And I can't think of a program that we recommend for our clients where we don't at least talk about email. I'll give you a picture. The way I think of email in digital marketing is like the foundation of your house. You build on it. Few people buy a house because they're in love with the foundation. Few people employ email marketing in their digital campaigns because they're in love with email marketing. It gets great results, actually. It's much more exciting to look at things you could do on Instagram or TikTok or whatever might be appropriate for you, but it's a great foundation. I like the honesty too. We got a few people who aren't really sure what works best. And we're going to talk about that and how you figure that out. Now, one of the things that we find over and over again, and the people who are really on the tip of the spear here at WordWrite are myself and Kira and the digital team. There are an awful lot of myths about digital marketing and storytelling. So we're going to take a little bit of time here, and we're going to give you some examples, and we're going to bust some myths. And Kira's going to jump in and join me.
I'm here for myth busting, Paul.
Okay, we love myth busters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff. All right, first myth: you can't tell a story on social media. Well, that's not true. Here are the co-founders of Warby Parker. They began this enterprise, I think this is correct, Kira, when they were students, right?
Yeah, grad students.
Right. And, that there was this epiphany, which we've talked about, that they might be able to do something better with getting glasses to people. And this was a little while ago. As you can see, this quote references the iPhone 3G. I think we're now up to the iPhone 12, right? So this is an anecdotal story about the founder losing his glasses on a backpacking trip, not being able to afford glasses through grad school. This transparency about the struggles that a co-founder of the company had enabled their customers to be able to see themselves in the shoes of the founder. The goal of these student founders, CEOs, was to take down the monopoly behind a high price of prescription glasses. And the message was that everyone has the right to see, and that paired really well with the brand's commitment to a one-for-one model of donating glasses to those in need. Anything you'd add there, Kira?
No, I mean, I think it's the best part of anybody's story is something that connects with, other people, that can make your customers or prospects or whatever feel connected to you. Like, oh yeah, I agree with that sentiment, and that's the first step. It's, starting to get them to feel like a partner with you. So they did that very well by kind of creating their own issue and saying, I'm sure other people feel this way too.
This is a very common strategy today, not just in digital marketing. But when Warby Parker began this, there were not that many companies doing this, and that is creating a social mission. When Warby Parker launched, again, it's the time of the iPhone 3G. Initially, the marketing of the company was focused on its inventory, its website, and they had a good PR firm. And the PR laid the foundation for kind of a word of mouth buzz that propelled the company in the first year. They got features in Vogue, GQ, and as a result, Warby Parker hit their first year sales goal in a matter of 3 weeks and generated a wait list of 20,000 customers. Now that was really just the start. There's a lot more to Warby Parker's storytelling than just that. Today, the company works with global partners to bring to life that idea that we talked about a minute ago, that for every consumer purchase, they're going to donate a pair of eyeglasses to visually impaired folks somewhere in the world. So far, they've donated more than 5 million pairs in 50 countries. And in 2015, the company started what it calls the Pupils Project, which has as its focus alleviating vision disabilities by providing free prescription glasses to children in need. Get it? Pupils. I like that. So Warby Parker often promotes these social initiatives through their digital marketing. And on the company blog, consumers can review the progress of the Pupils Project. What we got here on the screen actually is from their Twitter feed, 2018. And it's interesting how earned and digital media is tied together here, because it's an image of an article from the New York Times that notes that the vision impairment crisis only costs $1.50 per person to correct. And so you can see how that ties together with the company's commitment to providing eyeglasses to those in need around the world.
And Paul, if I could just jump in, I love this example because it feels so authentic. I don't know about anybody else on this call, but you know, every once in a while I go up to my parents' house and my dad has clipped out things from the newspaper for me to read, whether it was somebody I graduated with that's doing something, you know, remarkable or just a cool story. But it just feels so like that mix of, you know, mending the traditional newspaper with, you know, a tweet is kind of cool. And it just goes back to the brand that they're trying to communicate with their customers. It's like, you know, they could have just linked the picture in the New York Times article and linked the article, but the picture of the actual article in the newspaper, I don't know, something about that feels just genuine and really cool.
I like that as well. What does this do? This merger of the company's great story and digital marketing in conversation with the customers, the allies, the partners of the company. It creates a dialogue. And this is a really interesting project that the company did in 2018. They identified non-traditional Instagram influencers. And Kira, you can talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But we're not talking about celebrities here. They found people on Instagram who they identified as being representative of actually creative professionals, people who need their eyes, let's put it that way, right? And they featured them in video interviews that were paired with blog posts. The stories of the individuals are unique and inspiring. The goal was, as a result, for consumers to feel that they, or their own aspirations, if you will, were represented. And they're just great results. 18 posts in what was known as the Wearing Warby series, targeted 850,000 Instagram followers almost, and it created amazing engagement, more than 55,000 likes, 640 comments, and an engagement rate, an overall average of about 3.5%. Feel free to add, and especially maybe define what the engagement rate is there.
Yeah, I mean, this was a hugely successful campaign, and it was interesting because they did it at a time where influencer marketing was booming. I think you said 2018, Paul. So they would have been planning it in probably 17 and identifying these folks. And it's just interesting to me because, again, it's communicating their brand, their story of authenticity and being genuine. There's also a stat that some people on the call may have heard that millennials they are more likely to purchase from word of mouth or a friend's recommendation over a celebrity's recommendation. So if I had to guess, I'd say that probably was a catalyst to them identifying some of these influencers. But I mean, if you're looking, you know, you really have to squint your eyes. So I apologize, but I mean, 28,000 views on the girl on the bottom right for just her talking, it's Warby Parker's Instagram, but I mean, you know, her showing herself using Warby Parker glasses, just making a cake. And she, you know, it's just a really cool campaign, in my opinion, of really enhancing what their story is.
I'm just gonna tag on to what you said, Kira. Please don't squint. You are going to get copies of the slides afterwards, and you'll be able to have a little bit better look to Kira's point about what was shared there. We have one more Warby Parker example. So the best direct-to-consumer brands create this dialogue, and it flows both ways. That's what a dialogue is, right? It's not just buy my stuff, buy my stuff, buy my stuff. It's creating a community, an engagement, and having your users or your customers as part of the conversation. And one way that Warby Parker has done that is with user-generated content. Now, user-generated content, we're going to show another couple examples today, is very popular. It's not right for everybody, but when it is right, it can do amazing things. Now, what is one of the first things that people think about when they buy a pair of glasses or they're considering a pair of glasses? How do I look, right? So Warby Parker's Home Try-On campaign included a clever little call to action, and it invited consumers to share pictures of their new glasses on social media. Sometimes Warby Parker would weigh in as a company itself on social media to help consumers select using a hashtag Warby Home Try-On. So this tactic led to the creation of more than 56,000 user-generated videos. Not only that, Warby Parker found out that those who shared content were 50% more likely to make a purchase. So user-generated content isn't just something to create stuff on the internet. It is about helping consumers down that journey towards engaging with the organization. In this case, buying eyeglasses.
And again, they knew their audience with this one. People were actually already soliciting feedback on eyeglasses digitally amongst friends and family, and they took that trend and made it, they leveraged it for their both own good, but for their audience, I mean, it made people feel more confident doing this try-on program, hearing from strangers, oh, I love that one on you, and things like that. So I find that so interesting because it's, to me, it seems like a strange request, but how many people participated, it shows just the connection Warby Parker has with their audience. And again, this example is just that. It's an example. It doesn't mean that we're suggesting you put a video request videos if you have a law firm and you're requesting videos from your clients to talk about their most recent legal battles. Like, it has to be something that makes sense for your audience. And Warby Parker knew their audience or know their audience in and out to suggest these things. And that's why they're so successful, these campaigns, because these clients or these customers feel like, oh, Warby Parker's my friend, they get me. And that's really the best, that's the best marriage of telling a brand story and having your customers tell it for you too. Keep it going.
Well said, Kira. So Aaron has something in the chat pane for you. We're really scratching the surface today when we talk about digital marketing and storytelling. So we're pleased to share for everybody who is consuming this webinar live with us today, or maybe time-shifted consumption later, a download, Chapter 8 from my book, Finding Your Capital S Story. This is called Storytelling in Social Media, Made for Each Other. There are a few more examples in there and a lot more of the thinking behind what we're sharing today in terms of understanding why digital marketing, why social media and storytelling work so well together. Let's move on. Another myth. Certainly many people that we've dealt with have said this about Twitter. It's here today and gone tomorrow. One tweet here and then it's gone. This is a persistent myth. It's just wrong. You may not think so, but bear with us. Let's take a look at one great storytelling company and how it's evolved its story over time. The first example we're going to show you is from 2013. It's a YouTube video. The second example we're going to show you is from 2020, and it was a video on Instagram. I'm going to point out several things to you about these two examples. But first, let's start with the story of a fireman and a kitten. A few things I want to point out to you all from that video before we move on to show you this second example. This is 2013. It's the Fresno Fire Department. GoPro was selling its Hero 3 camera. They're now up to Hero 9 or 10, just to give you an idea. Again, it was done on YouTube, and it's, you know, several minutes long. It is user-generated content. GoPro, they live their story. Their capital S story is they make you hero in your own movie, right? Because you have your GoPro camera. So they said, let's have a contest and see what kind of content we get. And this was, of course, the winner of that initial effort. It went viral. It led to the creation, because of tens of thousands of dollars in contributions, to a nonprofit that works with the Fresno Fire Department to help take care of pets who are affected by disasters, including fire. You know, we think about, of course, our families when these sorts of events happen, but a lot of times people don't think about their pets. I mean, they certainly do in terms of they don't want them to be harmed, but there's usually not financial resources dedicated specifically to that. That's the power of a video like this. Now Aaron's going to show you a second video from 2020.
Let's go. Whoa. Yeehaw.
I could have showed you several others. A couple of things about that before we move on. Number one, it's shorter. Number two, it's on Instagram. Evolution of the story, however, still the brand. Notice that it's a COVID campaign. Stay safe, stay home. Those were the parameters that GoPro gave to its users. Show us how you're using your GoPro to be safe and to stay home. This guy just took his bedroom, moved all the furniture out, took his bed sheet and his ski equipment, something that he couldn't use, and he made an entire 1-minute movie with it. Again, user-generated content that aligns with the brand. Kira, anything you would add to what I've shared on those?
No, I think you covered it well.
Great. All right, we have an opportunity for another poll. Aaron, over to you.
Poll on your screen, so feel free to respond. Have you created a video for your company? We have a couple options. No, looking at videos is too expensive. A short one, only use a few times, or maybe you invest a lot in video content. So I'll give you a second to respond, then Paul, you can jump in and take it over.
Great.
I think we're good.
Great. Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate that. I'm pleased that nobody said that videos are too expensive. Actually, when digital storytelling was in its infancy, think about, you know, YouTube started in 2005. So 2013, the campaign I showed you for GoPro, YouTube was kind of well established, but really the prevalence of corporately inspired content like I showed you was kind of in its infancy. And that was one of the things people said all the time a few years ago: videos are too expensive. This is a very common answer. We hear this, see this a lot. Only done a short video, that we've used only a few times. I hope one of the things that people come away with today is that this digital content can be repurposed in many ways, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Okay, let's move on. I made some of these points already, that great digital stories can evolve over time. And in the GoPro example, it's from YouTube to Instagram, also shorter because of attention spans changing. The bottom line is they drive results. In the initial video I showed you from GoPro, it was about fundraising, which was unexpected and beneficial. And the campaign that I showed you, the Stay Home, Stay Safe, there were prizes and rewards for people to submit. Still, they got great results. And it really doesn't have to be expensive. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Now, while these examples are user-generated content, all of the principles we're talking about today can be applied to content that your organization creates. This is a very common myth as well. Is it all about the technology, or is it about the story? Well, it's really easy, especially with social media platforms, to get focused on the bells and whistles of the latest technology or social platform. But is that really what's bringing attention to your product or service or company? Or is it the story that makes the difference? It's sometimes hard to believe, but platforms do come and go. I mean, does anybody remember MySpace? Your authentic story endures, though. That's the difference. So we have another example for you. This is Airbnb, which started in 2008, but it really wasn't until 2014, 2015 that they really started to focus on their mission and start growing by focusing on that mission. In short, what the company needed to highlight was the capital S story of Airbnb. So right now, Aaron is going to share in the chat pane a link to a very interesting Medium post from 2017 that tracks very tightly with our philosophy on the capital S story. The author of this Medium post actually identifies the archetypal story that she believes that Airbnb represents. Because Airbnb is all about travel, you would think that that archetype would be something like the explorer. Now, the author of this article believes it's the lover archetype. And I think that's interesting because as we get into some of the other examples we're going to show you here in the next few slides about Airbnb, it seems really appropriate to me. Kira, anything you would add on that?
Nope, you covered it.
Great. Okay. So one of the things that's crucial for Airbnb, and this was especially true, and we'll talk about it during COVID, was a focus on keeping customers at the core of the story and learning from their experiences. One of the things that's happened with the prevalence of social is everybody's got a camera, and when people are taking amazing trips during which they might be staying at an Airbnb property, they're essentially building a story of their journey. And a part of what Airbnb has done so well is to take its desire to create community and authentic travel experiences and really work with the community, hosts, guests, and make this sense of belonging, if you will, kind of a worldwide value. And they've created a number of successful initiatives to support this concept. Now, between 2015 and 16 alone, just to put things in perspective, Airbnb's revenue grew by 80%. By 2017, the company had reached 2.6 billion in revenue, and it was hugely profitable, 93 million in profit. So this kind of storytelling works. I like this quote from Brian Chesky, who's the CEO of Airbnb. They've done a number of videos featuring guest photographers staying at Airbnb rentals around the world, and they set those to old songs sung by modern day singers. Again, these are short videos, very engaging. You've got the sound, the visual, great photographers who are also great storytellers. This is in part an effort that they've undertaken to restore relations with hosts and guests as well, but primarily hosts who were alienated during the pandemic because of changes Airbnb made that it felt it had to make that were related to limitations on travel, such as refunding trip money that guests had paid in advance of trips that they wound up not taking. Obviously, this had a financial impact on the hosts who were counting on that revenue and didn't get it. This was, in the words of Mr. Chesky, a really big campaign, and it's still running. He expects 300 million people to view the videos in this campaign by the time it's over.
If I can just jump in too, again, this is a perfect example of knowing your audience segments and what makes each of them tick. You know, after a really difficult year, 2020 with the travel bans and the moves that Airbnb had to make to support and refund travelers, they could have just moved on and focused on travelers, you know, in 2021, but they doubled down on their hosts and they supported them. And, you know, they saw the opportunity that if you support people that are, you know, doing business on your behalf, essentially, then you can continue telling your story and being authentic. So we have the headline here, stay resilient, focus on story. After a year, you know, the travel industry, you know, was shut down completely during a pandemic. Nobody can predict that. You see Airbnb didn't stop them. They're still investing in marketing and investing in a big campaign that's going to support their constituents. And that's, you know, really encouraging to see, but then also makes it gives you that feel good, right? You know, they're not ignoring the fact that 2020 was difficult, not only for them or travelers, but also these hosts that had mortgages to pay and mortgages that they kept on the books because they were a part of an Airbnb community that had a lot of, you know, guests staying there so they could afford them. So I really like that they doubled down and said, no, we're not going to, you know, spam out the wazoo to all of these travelers. We're going to focus on the hosts and still keep to our original story of telling that authentic, you know, when in Rome, do as the Romans do, and you're a local kind of story that they initially started with. So
that's great. Thanks for adding that, Kira. Really appreciate that. Let's move on to our final myth for today. Actually, this is the one that stops so many organizations that we talk to from getting started with digital storytelling. We're here to tell you, you do not need to spend a fortune to get started or to have success. We shared some examples because they're well known from organizations that you recognize. Kira is now going to explain how one of our own clients was able to have success with digital storytelling. Kira?
Yeah, so I want to get started with, you know, some of those examples. I think it's difficult for some clients and people we've talked to where, you know, okay, it's easy for Airbnb to sell travel. They just put pretty pictures up and get a nice photographer. Or, you know, it's easy for Warby Parker because they're selling glasses and everybody, you know, a lot of people need glasses, but I'm a more B2B focused, or I have a firm that has a longer sales cycle. How do I keep people engaged that entire time? So I think this example that we have is important. I think it's a good one for some of these firms that may not know how to dip their toes into a full campaign that may run for, you know, a year plus. So just to give you some background, we work with a wealth management firm. Their target audience is individuals with net worth of 5 mil or more. It certainly doesn't, help our pocketbooks in terms of buying ads, because that is a very expensive target audience. But nonetheless, we are always up for a challenge. So, how do we really talk to these individuals? A sub-segment of their audience they were interested in also talking to was this business owner. So, it's not a business owner of, a small sandwich shop, but somebody that possibly is towards the end of their career. They've owned the business for a while. High net worth, has a lot of potential of selling in the near future. Again, a very refined target, which is great when you enter into these conversations of planning and trying to start your inbound marketing campaign. For Waldron specifically, we lucked out that when we looked around at, we assessed all of the content we had for something getting into a target audience of a business owner with, that laundry list I just told you about, the business owner with a potential of selling in the near future. And that sale is going to, do pretty well for them, that they're going to need some financial advice on how to manage their wealth. So we lucked out, and one of the content pieces was the CEO John Waldron's book. It was called The Entrepreneurial Journey. So that was really the foundation that we started this whole campaign on. We built a landing page. We did do some earned media because, again, WordWrite is founded in traditional PR, 20 years ago. So we don't ignore that, and we embrace it. And we did some podcasts, some earned media opportunities. Definitely was enhancing our whole digital inbound marketing campaign. So we built the landing page, off of the whole, the struggle that John Waldron felt, and the reason why he wrote the book, The Entrepreneurial Journey. We all felt those are same struggles that a lot of business owners in his position now would have felt back in the day, or maybe are feeling in the midst of, being in this survival mode of owning their own business and trying to make sure it's succeeding. So we built the landing page. There's an opportunity to take a quiz on that kind of aligns with the phases of the book. We gave the book away, so anybody that landed on the page could get a free copy. And that was kind of our trigger into an enrollment of, a drip email campaign. So much to Paul's point before, we didn't ignore email. And then we did some paid efforts too. So you can see on the right on that screenshot, we have some display ads on Forbes. We had a paid search campaign. We had a lot of social campaigns, a lot of lead gen focused campaigns. So this was holistically, something to support the book, but not necessarily to sell the book. I mean, John made it very clear, the CEO of Waldron, that he wasn't interested in selling the book. He wanted to use it as, these potential prospects and give them something that can help them be successful and to set them up for success. And I think that story that Waldron is always, by their clients, partnering with them, making sure they're setting up their life and their wealth to be successful. That's the story we want to communicate here. John Waldron wasn't always the owner of a successful wealth management firm. He had to start from something. And that's what this book communicated. And that was kind of like the theme of the whole campaign. So I need, and I hate to read off a piece of paper, but I don't want to get this wrong. So I want to talk about the results. I think it was just in 6 months when we pulled these results, we were at nearly 6,000 page views of just the landing page. And when I say, just the landing page, it wasn't this huge microsite we created around this entire campaign. It was one page, and you're seeing it right there on the left of your slide. It's still active if you want to check it out. We had over 3,000 new users to the site, 3,324 to be specific. We had 3 leads go through their sales discovery process, which is it's a difficult process to be considered from WordWrite's perspective. For them to say 13 people went through it was a win for us, because they don't just put everybody through this gap process. It's proprietary to them. So that was a win. And then 2 new clients. And again, thinking about the original target, somebody with a net worth of 5 mil or more, or somebody owning a business that has the potential of selling in the near future and could have quite a bit of wealth. That's a tight target, and 2 of those clients in a 6 to 9 month period was a huge win for us. So it just kind of goes to show you that on a smaller scale, this company is out of Bridgeville, Pennsylvania, right outside of Pittsburgh, that you can do big things, and it does not have to be a $40,000 video campaign plus $2 million ad campaign. You really just need to know your audience, need to know your story, and communicate it along with whatever objective you're trying to meet. So I don't know whether Erin's going to pop in, but we do have a download that she just served, and it's our case study on that specific campaign. So you guys can check out if you want to read more about the details, some of the stuff I didn't cover, definitely download that.
Thanks, Kira. That was really great. Appreciate that. A person who conceived and ran the campaign explained it rather than me.
Well, I'd love to say I was one of the clients, with a net worth of 5 mil or more, but I can't say that. So
it's good. Just a matter of time. You'll get there. All right. What is the point of everything that we've shared so far today? We're about ready to take some questions. I know we're getting close to the top of the hour, and we definitely want to hear from you. Point is ROI, return on investment. In storytelling, in digital marketing especially, stories deliver results. They're memorable. They can be timeless, transcend culture. I think you get the sense of that. You look at some of the videos we looked at today. Some of them didn't even have any, audio of people speaking, right? And it's not just any story. It's your capital S story that really drives results. There's 3 things to think about as you leave the webinar today. Number 1, what's your digital ROI? Have you thought about that? Do you know what it is? Number 2, what's your capital S story? I gave you some examples earlier, and again, you're going to get the deck so you can refer to some of those examples later on. And then third, is your story, that capital S story, driving your digital marketing? For older people, the joke is, I don't want to see pictures of people's breakfast on Twitter or social media, right? There is that kind of content out there. There's a lot of junk out there, right? And it's easy to put junk on social media or into digital marketing. That's not going to get you results. Getting your story out there is what's going to drive results for your digital. We talked a little bit about my book today, which has been out for a couple of months now. When you get the slide deck, these should be live links. You'll be able to take a look at some other content that relates to principles we talked about today more broadly in terms of storytelling. Also, some links to the book as well. We'll share those with you. And I think, Erin, we're to questions, right? And back to you.
Thank you so much. And I now know never to share a picture of my breakfast, Paul, when I know you're following me. So that's
yeah, I don't think.
If I want to get your attention. All right. Well,
I like pictures of your breakfast, Erin.
All right. All right. Well, just while we are doing questions, we had some questions come through. Please go ahead and answer in the chat. We're just kind of curious to hear what digital platform do you want to learn more about? And just throw those answers in as you're listening in to Paul and Kira answer our questions from the audience. So let's get started. What metrics of success should we be looking at for digital campaigns when storytelling is the focus? I think this is an important one because a lot of people probably on this call think of storytelling as kind of a soft sell on social media, and maybe it's more of a brand reinforcement than an actual sales tactic. So what are what's the ROI? What are the KPIs that you guys are looking at on these campaigns?
You want to start, Kira?
Yeah, sure. So I'll say if you're looking to find what your return was after a campaign is done, then you've done something wrong. And I don't mean to be negative there, but the best campaign planning or overall marketing strategy plan is those metrics are created up front, so everybody's on the same page. If you use an agency, it's important that you're setting the expectations of what you expect from that campaign and the success metrics you need in order to say, okay, let's continue on with this campaign, or I want to continue investing. And same goes if you do internal marketing efforts. Really identifying those up front are important because that lays the land for the entire campaign. Ones that we commonly use are engagement rates, click-throughs based on the source. So if you're doing a paid search effort, click-throughs on certain keywords and, social media likes, follows, shares, things like that are common. Impressions are also common, but it's kind of, a watered down version of who is being exposed to your ad. And then in terms if you have a landing page, of course, traffic to that, or even your website, website traffic is always super important. And the point being, if you're looking at site traffic, you want people to spend time on your site. So they may land there for a certain campaign, but if you see them check in other parts of your site, that's a win. And that's kind of a micro metric that not a lot of people look at that we at WordWrite do. It's important that if they land there for a blog that you're promoting on social, but then they check out your team page and then maybe your services, like that's a huge win, because now they're interested in you and they're staying on your site. They're not going to your competitors. They're not searching things in your industry on Google. They're staying on your site and checking more out about you. So, if you have a CRM service like HubSpot, you can kind of track some of that. HubSpot is something we use, but there's certainly, a bunch of other resources, and you can track that and then possibly create a follow-up campaign from it as well. So, to answer the original question, I think it really depends on your objective and your campaign's objective, but setting those up front is really important.
All right. Great.
Anything from you, Paul? Or are you good?
No, that's great. Comprehensive.
Good.
All right, here's another question. I like what you presented today, but my company is relatively small and we really just don't have the bandwidth to tackle all the channels that we should be on. What should we start with? I think this is a question I think we always get. There's so many channels, going back to that slide, with just the options that companies have in terms of digital marketing. It can seem overwhelming, and for a smaller outlet, there's not really a whole lot of if you don't have a huge team, you can't tackle it all. So where would you start?
I would say walk before you run. Pick one channel and start there first. It's like riding a bike. First, you need to ride the bike. Don't start planning the Tour de France with all kinds of elaborate stuff. Make sure you can stay upright. And that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And that works for any organization, regardless of how many resources you have. Kira, anything you'd add?
Yeah, I would say it's not always about a huge budget. There are certainly organic efforts you can do. And what we've talked about today is an integrated campaign, right? So we talked earlier about Warby Parker and how they were tweeting pictures of a newspaper, and they actually started out with traditional PR and doing some press releases and stuff like that. It's not all about spending $50,000 on a marketing campaign. You can certainly start with a $25 campaign on social. Social is really cost effective, but then also post some organic stuff to your followers. Your followers have already raised their hand and said they're interested in you. So don't ignore them. And that's free. That's you engaging your followers. So that's an option. You can ask for reviews. Reviews are free. If you're willing to ask former clients or current customers to review you and have that on your Google page, or use a testimonial on your site. These are things that get people more confident in hiring you, and they're so to speak free and can be part of your digital strategy. SMS texting, again, is a really cheap option too if you don't want to play on the social realm.
Right. Great. I think we have time for just one more question that just came in at the end here. How do you demonstrate the impact of brand awareness in a new geographic market? And then how do you convince management that these touch points are important? So how would you use digital to target a new geographic market and convince your management?
Oh, Sharon, that's a loaded question. Okay, so the example I gave you with Waldron, they part of the objective, and if you downloaded the case study, you'll read it in there. Part of our objective on that campaign was actually to expand outside of the Pittsburgh market. They wanted to get in Detroit and DC. So how we started to kind of play in that was a little bit of earned media. So Erin was actually, Erin's the account supervisor on that account, and she was reaching out to publications in those areas. But then, LinkedIn especially, but social media gives you really good options for targeting. So you can get geographically relevant, for pretty cost-effective means. Social media is definitely an option. There's also something called geofencing, where you can basically serve a display ad on somebody's phone or tablet if they enter a certain zip code or longitude, latitude. You can kind of do whatever, but if somebody's entering your competitor's office in DC, then you can set up a campaign that it serves an ad as they enter that building. So there's definitely some creepy stuff you can do, but it doesn't have to cost you an arm and leg. And, you know, how you convince management the touch points are important. Gosh, you know, just showing other examples of best practices is a lot of the best ways that we show our clients it's important.
Yeah, the one thing I would add just real quick is benchmark. So typically when you're entering a new geographic market, there are already organizations in your industry that you're going to compete against. And one of the things about social media is that we can go out there and get their statistics and get a sense of how they're doing and benchmark against them. And then your progress can be tracked against that, right? So you can see through many of the social platforms, a competitor is at this baseline, and as you engage your digital storytelling campaign, your awareness, your number of followers, your engagement can be matched against that, and you can see the increase.
Oh, and FYI, anything you do, if you're tracking it correctly, you can check out on Google Analytics regionally where your traffic's coming from.
Yes.
So, you know, whatever, if you do an organic, if you tag it appropriately and you do an organic or even paid social media campaign, then you can see, you know, of what regions, who's visiting certain pages. So you can kind of, that's another way to track it, to Paul's point about benchmarks, is, you know, you could start from zero traffic from a certain region and keep an eye on it in your analytics.
Well, thank you guys. We're a little bit over time, so I want to wrap up here. Thank you everyone for joining today. And thanks to our speakers. As I mentioned at the beginning, all of the materials shared today, including the slides and the handouts, will be sent to you within the next couple days. And we'll also be including a recording of this session, so you can pop back in and get some of the commentary as well. So thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event. Take care.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks all.